We made it to the end. I'm hundreds of pages and over 100,000 words into this script, and now it's time to wind things down and bring you a conclusion. Endings are hard, even harder than beginnings, so let's start with our thesis. Hopefully by now you can see the effect pushing to be an Xbox 360 launch title had on the development of Oblivion. It is fun to imagine the game we could have gotten if Bethesda had gone at their own pace, but you then also have to wonder where Bethesda would be in the industry if they had done that. How much of the nostalgia and success surrounding this game can be owed to its release date, to people who had never played an RPG in their life trying this game out and discovering the unique gameplay formula that Bethesda was offering? Bethesda might not have ever gotten their chance if Oblivion had come out in 2007, a perfect RPG to an industry that doesn't care because they have Halo 3. Despite that, I don't think it's a valid excuse to blame all of the iniquities of the game on a deadline. After all, in terms of man-hours, Bethesda still had as much time, if not more time, than they had spent on Morrowind. Morrowind didn't start real development until after the Y2K disaster had ravaged all of the computers. But Oblivion had a larger team, more designers, more artists, more visions of what Elder Scrolls is. 2006 may have been a limiting factor to Oblivion, but it will never be as limiting as the changes in design philosophy at Bethesda. A design philosophy that says that content can't be exclusive, that allowing writers to be inconsistent with their work is preferable to restricting their design, that large dungeons don't need context to be interesting, that making the Daedra more palatable to a Christian culture was better than making them unique, that the premise trumps the execution, and that making the game more accessible to the lazy who feel satisfaction in checking off boxes is preferable to maintaining the series' roots and requiring the spirit of adventure from its players. Todd Howard is still doing his thing at Bethesda as executive producer, selling his games and shielding his devs from purse holders. Ken Rolston retired after Oblivion, but not for long, as he moved on to the cancelled Ascendant, and from there led the development of Kingdoms of Amalur. Mark Nelson would go with him, but more interesting than that is the duality of two Shivering Isles designers. Almost matching the theme of the Shivering Isles expansion are John Paul Duvall and Eric J. Capone. Capone would go on to work on Fallout 3 and even took a lead design position on its DLC, The Pit, before joining Nelson and Rolston on Kingdoms of Amalur. Inversely, you have Duvall. Duvall went on to design for Fallout 3, and then Skyrim, and then Fallout Shelter, and then Fallout 4, and then Fallout 76. It's the duality of artists. One took a risk on a game, the other stayed in a comfortable, if increasingly stagnant, position. Kingdoms of Amalur failed, by the way. While an EA partnership was definitely a bad move, the real lethal mistake was not understanding their place in the industry. A freshman studio needing to sell 3 million copies just to break even is a sign that you sold your idea to investors way bigger than you could actually manage. Hell, a new studio with just star power selling 1.2 million copies in 3 months is by itself impressive. Bethesda's next move was Fallout 3. They had acquired a license to make a game in the franchise, and in 2007 would acquire full ownership of the intellectual property. After that, Elder Scrolls would see the first and only game of the 2010s, Skyrim. Elder Scrolls 6 has been announced, but only as a marketing ploy. Bethesda has been busy working on Starfield, and as of writing this has not finished development on that game yet. Ultimately, Elder Scrolls seems to have left a hole in a lot of people. There's something about these games in particular that leaves a feeling of unresolved apprehension. I don't think, however, that the future of the franchise informs Oblivion. Did Bethesda learn? Yes, but in my opinion they learned all the wrong lessons. They learned what was necessary to broaden their appeal, beyond the breadth that was Oblivion. For April Fools, I made a mod of Oblivion that connects 50 of its dungeons to the tutorial, effectively turning the game into a roguelike. Unexpectedly, I've been told that this actually makes the game kind of fun. It focuses you into the mechanical mindset of the game, making you appreciate aspects of it most people just ignore. In a way, it takes all of the nostalgic baggage away. And I think, at the end of this, nostalgia is the game's biggest obstacle. It's not about how good a game is, it's about how a game made you feel at a particular moment in your life. Skyrim fans should look at how Oblivion really is, and realize the only reason that hasn't happened yet to Skyrim is because TES 6 hasn't come out yet. So let's strip the nostalgia back one last time. Oblivion is a game with goofy voices and goofier faces that tells bad stories and makes the act of leveling tedious. It made stealth archery overpowered, it made combat boring, and it squandered the creative potential of magic in favor of balance. It's full of dungeons that are so repetitive that people believe they're all just copy-pastes of each other. It effectively started the practice of downloadable content, and it watered down its setting and mechanics to broaden its appeal. Despite that, it brought us another masterpiece of a Jeremy Soule soundtrack. There's a lot of lore contributions that are positive, just not to their full potential, and Oblivion had a lot of concepts that evolved into better quests in Skyrim. It brought a new generation into role-playing games, some of who would even become more interested in what was at the time just a niche genre. Section by section, then. The combat rework is at odds with the new leveling system. In fact, the new combat could work if the game wasn't raising the bar on new enemies as you progress. Instead, it becomes a static game of weaving outside of the AI's attack range and blocking choreographed attacks, while magic suffers because it's extremely difficult to stay at a level where it feels good to use, and the enemies won't take too much damage. And the stealth overshadows all because it's now on the other side of the spectrum from where it was in Morrowind, going from the weakest playstyle to becoming the dominant strategy of the game even without poison. In turn, the leveling attempted to take steps towards trying to improve the overall experience. In theory, the player should no longer step into a random dungeon and find themselves completely outclassed. In practice, the player has to play a very specific way to not find themselves outclassed in all dungeons in the late game. Perks are a good addition to the game, providing new mechanical potential to mastery of skills. I think the only problem is that there really isn't a way to check out your perks in-game in Oblivion, as once the prompt is dismissed, it's gone forever. The problem is that there's simply too much incentive to grind the skills we want to use, instead of the stated goal of the system, which is to have the character develop around the playstyle, instead of the traditional way things work in RPGs where players have to develop around their character. The other problem is that equipment scales with the world as well, less an issue because bandits are wearing Daedric and glass, and more an issue where the player has no reason to commit themselves to low-level gear you inevitably realize will be outclassed. The worst incarnation of this is the realization that rewards are leveled, and that random dungeon trash will outclass your special amulet simply because you made the mistake of doing the content you were most interested in first instead of last. And that content is in varying shades of quality, most of which simply aren't good. It feels like all the playtesting went towards finding bugs instead of performing introspection to determine if the questlines told good stories and finding out if the game was fun. I think that all of these questlines have solid premises, hence why I didn't really hate any of them. It's just bad execution. What I did hate was nothing, really. There's nothing in Oblivion that inspired hatred in me. It's not my most or even second most played Tez game, but it's far from my least played Howard game. Perhaps at some point I would have handily affixed the pleb tier title on Oblivion, but now I finally come to an understanding of it that so few can give, despite how many that have tried. The arena is clearly unfinished. It tried something interesting, but once you've cleared all the human enemies, there isn't anything to it. In a game that has radiantly generated lists of characters it can use built right into the editor. The Fighters Guild is more of a Traveler's Guild, but in a game where any character can freely teleport, travel is meaningless. The Mages Guild is a mess of a story that isn't even really sure what it wants to be about. The main quest does know what it wants to be about, but was far too ambitious with what it wanted to accomplish. The Knights of the Nine is mediocre. It gives a lot to think about, but not a lot to do. The Thieves Guild is a better story than most, but it hardly projects the criminal fantasy onto the player, instead providing a stealthy shade of heroism. The Dark Brotherhood is not heroic, but there also isn't much of a story to it. More of a loose collection of quest ideas. There is creativity to the quests, but not consistency. The Daedric and side content of the game is also a mixed bag. In a world as culturally diverse as Cyrodiil, the NPCs are homogenous. The writers didn't account for Colovia and Nibene being of different cultures, let alone, of course, the jungle thing. The sound engineers didn't have any other way of organizing voice lines than alphabetical order. The only thing that differentiates the races are height sliders and skin tones. We're in the heart of the Empire, the home of a religion older than Christianity, and they have no militant branch, no political connections, barely even a priestly body. The Imperial cult had much more of a presence in Morrowind, a land where they were missionary invaders. The Imperial Legion has barely any soldiers, most of them performing simple guard duty in the Imperial City. They aren't joinable and they have no character. They could all literally be clones for all we see of them. In Morrowind, there was a legion of predominantly orcs with a variety of characters and motivations, even a cult which planned to assassinate the Emperor. And that was just one fort. Now we're in the Heartland where we should be seeing all sorts of legionaries. Where are the Redguard warriors loyal to the Empire? Where are the Altmer battle mages? Where are the Bosmer scouts? There isn't really much of a cultural overlap with the neighboring provinces. You might notice an increase in a certain race, but their unique cultural identities are suppressed because it was outside the scope of what this game could accomplish. Imagine how the Bretons are portrayed in Skyrim, but for every race in Oblivion. I don't have a fitting conclusion for our character. Nothing like stepping off the dock at Raven Rock, because the cock isn't a character. Not like the Morrowind characters were, who all made choices and had quirks that defined them. This character did not make decisions. They had no morality. They had no, character. I can't even really pin down what their motivations were to begin with. All I have is the moment where I play him for the last time, where I play Oblivion for the last time. And like Morrowind, I doubt I'll ever do a playthrough of vanilla Oblivion ever again. I guess I'll get this one out of the way. Have I tried playing Nerim? For those unaware, Nerim was a German game made using the construction set and Oblivion assets, and the answer is not really. I started Nerim and was then forced through the Oblivion intro dungeon on steroids before stopping for the day and never picking it back up again because I had moved to a new computer. I might have been more enthused to pick it up again had it not decided on such a, at times, literally railroaded introduction. The next thing would be to talk about more Oblivion, Skyblivion, whatever port me and you of names we're using right now. I'm not really sure why you would choose to play more Oblivion over just playing Morrowind, short of being really, really bad at Morrowind. It just doesn't seem ideal to stamp Oblivion gameplay over Morrowind's world. I guess that logic would apply to Oblivion. Although, if all it takes are a couple gameplay mods to make Oblivion fun, I'm not sure why you wouldn't go that route. Skyrim and Oblivion, at least mechanically, don't have that much in common. Do people like Skyrim's gameplay, but Oblivion's world that much? I'm sure I'll try it at some point. I do want to do a heavily modded playthrough of the TES series to showcase the potential. Since this video first released, Bethesda developed and shadow dropped a full remaster of Oblivion, which preserves much of the game design with small tweaks while completely reworking the graphics. And then they decided to finally shadow drop the remaster they've been threatening to do for a couple years, so I guess I'll talk about it. I didn't think it was real, not real enough to be home when it happened. For context, 2 years ago there was a leaked document that outlined one of ZeniMax's old internal release forecasts. It was the same one that forecast Starfield coming out in 2021, to give you an idea of why I didn't trust it. Naturally, a global pandemic changed all those plans. I always figured any plans for a Oblivion remaster were tentative at the time and likely lost in the chaos, but people would keep bringing it up every couple months. Imagine my surprise when, in the middle of cycling across the Arizona desert, I get notified that it was real and it had been shadow dropped. Did Oblivion need to be remastered? I'm generally against the concept of remaking and remastering old games, so obviously I'm going to say no. Oblivion was a game that controlled fine and could easily be updated through digital platforms to work flawlessly on modern systems. Most of its major issues were either things they couldn't fix or various design jank that's iconic to the game. They could have just made a next-gen update and sold that on new consoles for like $10, but instead they bankrolled a big remaster, and here we are. The Western games industry is so clueless as to what gamers want that they have spent like a quarter of their time and budget just remastering their old games because it seems to sell better than their new ones. Things were so dire in 2023 that Microsoft shills would claim that the Quake 2 remaster was one of their big launches for the year. If a remaster of a game almost as old as I am is in the running, then 2023 must have really sucked. The games industry is giving the record companies a run for its money when it comes to being in the downward spiral. I don't like remakes because I'd rather that effort be put into making new things. Give someone the license to make a new side title in the series that isn't a mobile game. And I don't like remasters because I don't like overwriting the work of artists, most of whom are often the people who did the best job when making the original game. Bethesda's developers are in a spectrum. The most controversial department is the writing and design team, followed by the programmers in the middle, and the least controversial being the artists. That's why it's ironic that the design is what has been preserved the most, and the art the least. That's been my take for a while, and obviously a lot of people disagree with me. It's a little disappointing to me that there were people who wanted to try Oblivion for years, who are enjoying Reblivion now, but for whatever reason just refuse to play the original. Also, let me just shoot this down early in the video. Morrowind fans, they don't want a remaster. I've acquired a large portion of the fanbase, and I've never heard anyone say or think it would be a good idea. Morrow boomers aren't lashing out because they're jealous. It's the same grudge they've been holding for almost 20 years over the fact that Oblivion is not really a sequel to Morrowind like we had wanted. Even Todd Howard agrees with not wanting a remaster. But people always complain about the ugly NPCs and gameplay, so why not release a version that fixes that? Because I think Oblivion is a package deal. You need these faces with this voice acting saying this writing, or I don't think it works. You need these models doing these animations over this gameplay. It's packaging 2025 looks and expectations into a game where the enemies can't handle the player standing on a rock. That said, while that is my mentality towards this kind of thing, I am happy a lot of people are enjoying Oblivion anyways, so it's hard to be mad that it exists. If it rekindles people's enjoyment of this style of game, then the RPG indie renaissance can siphon a portion of that into their market share. Be sure to check out Tainted Grail and Ardenfall, by the way. One cool thing was the confluence of people interested in and talking about Oblivion again. You've got people build theory crafting and sharing advice, so that's cool. Plus my video got more views. I'd like to be positive and think that people accepting Oblivion in 2025 would be a sign Bethesda could take that they should make Elder Scrolls 6 and not Skyrim 2.
And I think there's so many games now that do those things that people are ready for something that does a lot of the things that, older hardcore RPGs, some that we used to do, doing those again in a new way.
Starfield didn't fail because you were wrong about people being ready for hardcore mechanics. Starfield failed because it sucks and is boring. People can handle real RPGs, you just need to make it not awful, and I know that is a tall order. Instead, they allowed leakers to control the release of information. There are some assumptions people have made about this. The main one I've heard is that Microsoft apparently has so little faith in their ability to market in 2025 that they're trying out the idea of not marketing at all. Microsoft is very inept at their marketing. When they announce games, they do a bad job of getting people interested or excited. Then they fail to properly set expectations among the few people who even cared after the first trailer, and then they drop the game, and sometimes few people even notice that they've done that. Some have remarked this is due to a change in how people are engaging with marketing, but I don't buy that. What's more likely, consumers changed, or the company that released Avowed is bad at marketing? It's not unreasonable that after the Avowed debacle earlier this year, someone at Microsoft realized that people were just going to mock the visuals of Oblivion on social media, and that might hamper the game's ability to find its audience. I mean, people were already trying to do it in the narrow window of the release day between when it dropped and when people finished downloading it. Todd Howard has stated in an interview before that he would prefer to have a short marketing cycle, basically just dropping a game and allowing it to speak for itself.
I like when you really see the game to when it's out is as short as possible.
Yeah.
Short as people will let me.
I mean, with Fallout 4, you guys, again, inspired a lot of other publishers to kind of go that same route of, we're going to announce it and then ship it 6 months later.
5 months, yeah.
5 months.
Yeah, that was as short as I was told anyone would allow me to do.
You would go shorter if you could?
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe, I'm trying to think what's perfect right now. Maybe a week just to get people excited.
Right.
To have those moments of, I saw it, there's some trailers, percolates in your mind, and they're...
So you would rather just not even...
Don't hold me to that,
Yeah.
all right? Because you should just cut that.
You'd rather just not even... I mean, you're going to put me out of business doing that stuff.
Really?
It's a good thing someone else was in charge of marketing then, because I can't imagine Fallout 76 or Starfield faring better if they had even less marketing than they already did. Spoiler alert, if you follow a lot of indie game developers, they're also going to say that they don't want to market their games. Yeah, it turns out that marketing is just something that is like a thing that you have to do. Like, nobody wants to do it, they have to do it. Starfield was marketed poorly. Can we admit that in 2025? Starfield had 2 demos and neither of them set player expectations when it came to how the player would explore the world, or just how many loading screens there would be. Instead of a vertical slice to get people comfortable with the flow of how Starfield is intended to be played, they played it fast and choppy, leaving it up to players to bring their own mentality to the game. But the fact that Starfield is remembered as the game that started the fucking pronouns rant, and not as, an actual game, kinda tells me that raw numbers on a trailer alone don't properly sell someone. So yeah, I can't blame them. The thing is, people would be picking apart the trailers to laugh at all the questionable graphics decisions that were made. And I don't think that's really representative of Oblivion. I think this is a rare circumstance where the game really did fare better because they didn't market it. But I would look at something like Hi-Fi Rush and the fact that it did so well that Microsoft shut down the studio that made it as a sign that this shadow dropping idea only really works when it's something people want anyways. Reblivion has done as well as it has, rather obviously, because it's fucking Oblivion. They're riding on the success of a 20-year-old game. My hope is that Microsoft will embrace this shadow dropping strategy and release Starfield's second DLC without any marketing. If the 300,000 people on Steam minimum who bought the $100 edition of Starfield couldn't be bothered to return for the DLC that they had already paid for, well, let's just see how well not marketing it at all goes. I participated in a Reblivion stream for a couple hours and was already getting annoyed at the engine discourse. While it has always been a little annoying, I got tired of having to need to keep explaining it, so I'll do it once. This game has two engines, Unreal Engine 5, which is handling the graphics, and Gamebryo, which is handling the gameplay. As a result, the game feels like Oblivion in how it controls, how objects and NPCs are loaded and behave, and how quests progress, just with modern graphics. It's not a remake of Oblivion in UE5, it is a coat of paint. However, this means that it comes with all the downsides of being a UE5 game. It's dated and looks like a first-party engine title from 5 years ago, using the same generic shaders and lighting tick that every UE5 game has, giving it a rather generic look. It's also extremely bulky at 125 gigabytes, SSD required, of course, and optimizing it is outsourced to the player. The game ran fine on my rig as long as I was in interiors, but of course I knew this was because the scene is relatively simple. Meanwhile, the overworld ran like shit. I guess someone didn't foresee that it would probably be best to render two different levels of quality depending on the scene, but then again, this is authentic to the original game. Oblivion in 2006 also ran like garbage in the overworld, and was fine in dungeons. The Steam rating has gone down with time. I suspect some people being confused why there hasn't been any kind of updates optimizing this game. I could honestly believe another theory I've heard that Microsoft shadow dropped this because they weren't confident in it, and that's why they were slow to start patching it. Any patches made would have been getting worked on during the release window, so if everyone had just moved on expecting it to flop, of course there wouldn't have been any updates for over a month after release. My first draft of the script kind of devolved into just listing changes and giving commentary on them, but I hit the wall because it was boring. So I scrapped it entirely and completely rewrote everything from here on. I'm just going to tackle what stood out to me during my playthrough. For my run-through, I largely ignored the questing in favor of just treating Oblivion like a dungeon crawler. The most obvious thing that stood out was the heightened leveling speed. In the time it took me to get to level 20 in Reblivion, I was only level 8 in normal run-throughs of Oblivion. They've reworked many of the skills to have a more Skyrimified leveling progression. Like everything else in this remaster, however, it's inconsistent and poorly done. Oblivion uses a very basic system for tracking experience gain and leveling. Example, Restoration. You get 0.6 experience for every spell cast, no matter what. The number of casts you need is then influenced by whether the skill is in your class or specialization, but the end result is that you can be looking at thousands of casts to max out the skill throughout an entire playthrough. Because actions reward a flat amount of experience, pretty much every skill incentivizes doing as little as possible to increase the number of that action. You will level faster using an Absorb Health 5-point spell 10 times than a single 50-point spell. People who don't know this tend to find Oblivion's leveling frustrating. That is why Skyrim changed most of its experience gain formulas to factor in more context. In that game, restoration factors in the amount of healing you do, or the amount of magicka used on a non-healing spell. As a result, you don't have to worry about using weak magic to level faster. They've changed Oblivion magic leveling to factor in the base cost of spells, but there's a core issue. The XP curve is really low. It might not have even been changed from the base games. Okay, so if you give players more experience for doing the things they unlock from leveling but don't require more experience to level, then players will level exponentially faster as they progress. You can see this in Skyrim with the alchemy skill. You get experience based on the value of the potion, but leveling alchemy makes potions more powerful, which makes them more valuable, which makes them award more experience, meaning it easily snowballs in speed. Bear in mind, Skyrim does have an XP curve for alchemy, and Oblivion already had an XP curve for all of its skills as well. That's why you level faster from 5 to 6 than you do from 99 to 100, but those curves have to be tuned to account for quirks of a magicka-based XP system. In Oblivion, spells are gated not by magicka cost, but through a permit system. Getting to 50 restoration unlocks the Journeyman tier spells. So at Novice, you start with Absorb Health, which does 5 damage for 12 magicka base cost. At Apprentice, you can double that damage, but it increases the magicka cost 2.5 times. That happens again at Journeyman and Expert. Technically, it's not literally 2.5 times every time, but it is within 0.1 margin of error. But the point is that the Expert Absorb Health spell does 8 times as much damage for 15 times as much base magicka. But since you're at least level 75 in Restoration, the effective spell cost is actually reduced. So you get the base cost XP, but you don't need to spend the base cost magicka. This is an important distinction because in Skyrim, effective costs are reduced through perks and gear. So while you could theoretically level faster by always up-ranking your spells, it was limited by the number of perk points and item investments you had. The result, though, is that in Oblivion, Restoration levels faster the higher level you get as long as you keep upgrading your spells. I was getting a level in Restoration every couple fights. And this is true for every school of magic, and alchemy as well. Alchemy is actually so busted that I leveled from 25 to 75 in about 10 minutes of spamming Restore Fatigue potions. This has obvious consequences. Oblivion still has level scaling, so the fact that I was leveling so rapidly meant that I was skipping entire tiers of progression. I got dumped into the end game with 1 magic ring and a dwarven dagger against people with Daedric equipment in the highest levels of enemies. But it wasn't as bad as that would be in regular Oblivion because I still had access to pretty good magic thanks to the fact that I had done something most Oblivion players have never seen before. I leveled Restoration past 60. Oblivion changed it to where all skills now contribute to your overall level up. I don't know the hard numbers, but it isn't terribly far off from how Oblivion would level. That said, this means that you really have every reason now to not put magic skills in your class. They level so quickly as it is that you're better off milking that character experience from 5 to 100 for some extra levels. Now, is this an upside? I mean, magic is now viable without grinding. I started leveling Destruction after character level 25, and I got it to skill level 25 in 4 fights. Really, most of the skills I tested didn't seem to need grinding at all. That's why I was annoyed when some old Oblivion head was trying to tell me how to grind up my sneak skill, like, bro, it's over level 50 and 24 hours of casually using it. I don't think I need to grind it. But that's how ingrained grinding is in people's perception of Oblivion, and I guess that is worth addressing in a remaster. Another minor thing is that if you're using security in Oblivion, the locks will level up faster than you can level the skill. You either need to use Alteration or grab the skeleton key as soon as possible. Obviously, though, there's another big progression-oriented consequence of these leveling changes. Oblivion changed the way attribute progression works in a way I'm not entirely happy with. While the old system encouraged neuroticism, that was entirely a consequence of changes to how much control the player had over the skill leveling through trainers and books, as well as the impact scaling has on the overall experience. The new system, however, just forces the player to be non-committal. It shoves everyone into the same homogeneous box, and it kills min-maxing. That's actually not a good thing. Min-maxing is degenerate, but it is also voluntary. It was just one of the 4 imperfect ways I talked about in my Oblivion video that you can try to address the scaling problem. I did it because it's the most interesting and fun way I have found to try to engage with Oblivion. No, I actually didn't optimize the fun out of my Oblivion playthrough. What I described in my video was my experiences with the game when I wasn't min-maxing. Falling behind the curve because of non-meta play, dirty levels, feeling forced to level endurance every time, that's all regular Oblivion. Metagaming Oblivion at least adds interest to the experience. So, yeah, they've just standardized everyone into getting the same number of attribute points. No thought, effort, or skill to it. They call them virtues now for some reason, but mainly that's just a way of making it so luck functions somewhat similarly to the base game. A point in luck takes up 4 virtues, everything else takes 1 point per attribute point. You can go up to 5 points in an attribute, but you can only pick 3 different ones. So, in other words, you can't keep all of your attributes in clean multiples of 5 anymore. I get the intention behind the system, and it's interesting they went with every player getting 12 attribute points per level. I don't think that's anywhere near what a first-time player would get in Oblivion. In the base game, you get a +5 to an attribute if you raise its skills by 10 points, so 12 attribute points is assuming roughly 21 skill ups, or 16 skills if you raise up luck. So it's definitely leaning towards standardizing everyone around a mildly meta amount of attribute gains. Obviously, the big change is that your attribute progression is no longer linked to what skills you're using, which means that I maxed out my strength first thing on a build that was using magic. I am supportive of breaking what Oblivion originally encouraged and putting off using certain skills if it is an off level, but I am also disappointed that the reward for choosing is lost. Desiring strength and magic pushes an Oblivion player into a battle mage playstyle, whereas now my Spellblade is getting a free pass to pick and choose the most useful attributes, in favor of committing to the ones the skill set I selected favors. Now, I was cognizant that daggers have had their scale damage tied to agility rather than strength. I was merely going for the carry weight bonus, something that Spellblades have to figure out how to compensate for in other ways, such as feather effects and favoring lighter equipment. The biggest change, though, is endurance. Endurance is a tough thing. You either have Oblivion endurance or Fallout 3 endurance. It's either the most valuable attribute in the game or something you don't think about. The change they've made is that health gains are now retroactive. I've taken a step at rebalancing Morrowind endurance in the past, which is the same as Oblivion in premise, and I have found that retroactive health gain is probably the laziest solution. To me, endurance only holds value if it's tied to how your health is progressing throughout a playthrough. If you give players health retroactively, that means they only need to level endurance when they feel like they don't have enough health, rather than considering it much sooner. I made it a point to make endurance one of the last things I leveled just to make sure that Oblivion design really was rewarding this lack of commitment. The fact that you no longer need to use block, armor, and that you no longer need to weigh your benefits solves the problem by just further homogenizing playstyles. In theory, magic and stealth are offsetting health gains from endurance in other ways, such as stealth damage or magic fortifications. That's not really how it panned out in Oblivion, but this change is a massive overcorrection. You've already made it so people can freely gain 5 endurance points without even being a martial class, so it seems unnecessary to then also remove the commitment of even just selecting the endurance attribute. I honestly think either change alone would have been adequate, but both compromise each other. It's like wearing 2 condoms at once. And then we have the enemy scaling. I have heard it was changed. I didn't notice if it was. What I did notice was the difficulty slider was turned into 5 static options. So instead of smoothly moving the difficulty up 1 tick at a time to find the sweet spot, you either have Adept, which in most cases is comically easy, or Expert, which can turn into one-shot city. It is fascinating seeing people in 2025 running into the wall that is the Oblivion leveling problem. People are unironically trotting out the big 4 arguments again. Just play, don't level, min-max, and cheat or use mods. Now here's the thing, unfucking the leveling scaling in Oblivion is not an easy thing to do. They seem to have stuck with extremely basic and minor changes to try to address other issues, whereas level scaling is so systemic of a problem that they would probably have ruined the entire game if they had actually tried to fix it. I don't think you can look at the level of quality of the other changes made so far and say, yes, please touch every aspect of the game and fine-tune the balancing just like you did with the magic skills. So yeah, I guess the upside of leveling faster is that it rips the band-aid off quicker when you smash into the end game. There are also across-the-board changes to the perk system, but most of it's just boring mechanical synopsis of, I guess that change is alright. I don't know why the new perks are so scared of power attacks doing paralysis. It was kind of a cool thing about weapon skills, but a lot of the perks were reworked to be more useful, or more appropriate when it comes to what level they show up. Although obviously the best change is that you can browse them at any time and read their descriptions in the user interface. Sprint has been added though, combined with all of the other ways you could already make your character fast, and it is pretty broken. It sadly has to replace the dodge roll though, which has been turned into a useless sidestep ability. So I was actually testing out the dodge feature to get some footage for the video, and I noticed just how bad the dodge is, at least out of the box. It's straight up just worse than using block at even like skill level 5 in your block skill. There's no iframes to it, and you have to dodge out of the way as soon as the enemy starts to swing. The enemy's attack hitbox is also really large, so even back dodging, you're still within range to end up getting hit anyways. It really is a terrible dodge mechanic. And further affirmation that any attempt on their part to rebalance scaling would have been a waste of time, because they weren't competent enough to do that if they can't even add a basic dodge mechanic. A character with a moderate speed stat can already move faster out of harm's way than this dodge. I didn't really focus on trying to use it though, so maybe it has value, but I think the distance that it dodges should be correlated with the speed and agility attributes. Sprint definitely does have value, if only because it speeds up the process of being in a town. The user interface and experience has been changed quite a bit in the remaster. It's funny I've seen people being critical of these changes when most of them are not only positive but drastic improvements over the original game. It is true that the basic heads-up display has been Skyrimified. I don't personally mind, except that I find Skyrim's health bars annoying because it can be deceptive how close a creature is to death when it reduces the display from both ends for the purposes of just symmetry. I don't mind the compass changing position or style as well, but I could do without the name readout and distance to locations because it made it feel even cheaper than it already is to just know, oh, that's the Shrine of Azura over that hill and 170 feet. As to the menu itself, while it is somewhat UE5 slop in terms of having a top header of all categories, I don't really mind. I like being able to press one button that goes to a unified menu system, rather than having two menus that either go to the settings or in-game menu. The immediately obvious thing is that the new user interface actually uses more of the screen. The character menu is about the same with the added pop-out feature of getting to see perk descriptions. The inventory screen is, well, there is still a near useless all items tab, and the weapons and gear tab are the same. They've upgraded the number of items you can see from 6 to 9, which is an improvement, but then the troubles start in the potions tab. You will notice that they got rid of item subcategories. In Oblivion, the alchemy tab is split between the potions and ingredients, whereas it's all jammed together in Oblivion. This obviously made alchemy more tedious because I'd have to navigate around all of the items mixed together, and I had a lot more instances of accidentally eating potion ingredients instead of drinking the potion that they were next to. And then we get to the miscellaneous tab. Everything's mixed together. Scrolls, clutter, soul gems, keys, lockpicks, torches, hammers, books. This menu's a mess and makes the already annoying task of trying to use these items consistently even more annoying. Go figure. Again, if they had listened to me, they would have gotten rid of the All Items menu tab and added one specifically for stuff like scrolls and soul gems. However, one improvement is that the magic effects of an item will instantly pop up in a consistent location rather than out from the side near the item in different parts of the middle of the screen. But then they removed the ability to see how many charges your weapon has left from the overview. Instead, you now have to open a new Details menu and cycle to the enchantment page because it just consumes so much space they couldn't have combined into a single pop-out page. No, I don't want to quickly know how many charges I have left. What I need to know is that this dagger is a dagger. Why tell me what its enchantment is when you can just tell me that it is enchanted? There is a prompt to show shortcuts, which I think is good for reminding players that hotkeys exist and that you really should be using them. However, there have been zero quality of life features added to make inventory management faster. You still can't mark things as junk for auto-depositing into a container or selling off. You still can't sort by cost-to-weight ratio out of the box. There's still no search bar to just type in the names of items to find them instantly. Any kind of long-term play is going to just have an increasing issue with inventory management, as Oblivion was already a game where you would look and realize you've been carrying this useless item for like 2 hours. The magic menu is mostly the same as well. There's a pointless all spells menu. The removed categories means you now have to scroll through the scrolls, and you can still not delete spells from this menu out of the box. But they added new filters. You can filter by whether something is a scroll or not, which isn't really a solution, and like you made that problem, but okay. You can also filter by schools of magic now. That's cool. But hey, Skyrim guys. You know in Skyrim, you have this thing called the favorites menu, where I can tag things as a favorite and then pop it up on screen whenever I want. You put it in your most successful game, and then you never really used it again, despite it being the most useful element you have when you have tons of options in combat. The active effects menu has had a glow up. You can sort by whether effects are positive or negative, and whether they're coming from powers, spells, your birth sign, racial traits, or enchantments. And it's sortable by school of magic and magnitude. I'm not sure why they added so many new categories to filter items by in the magic menu, yet didn't add anything new to the inventory screen. Also, there's a cool new button that will explain spell effectiveness and what's contributing to your lowered score, although it seems unable to actually do math, as it told me I was at 92% effectiveness, but I was losing 12% due to my armor. They also added clairvoyance to Oblivion. Doesn't really have anything to do with anything. Just think it's weird they added a new default spell and it's a redundant quest marker. It's cool that it's in the mysticism school though. I like to think that's a positive sign. The map was also improved. It takes up the entire screen now, and can zoom out enough that you can see the entire map, horizontally, but not vertically. There's also color coding for the icons now, and you can even disable them if you're looking for specific map markers for some reason. I don't know, maybe it helps with farming Oblivion gates. They also added a generic help menu with details. It's whatever. I did find it funny though that the pre-recorded videos in the help menu were obviously recorded at a low frame rate and even have the same pop-in issues. So yeah, I don't think it's a crazy good UI, but it is still an improvement. They preserved a lot of the original artwork as well. Some people don't like the generic UE5 menu style, but I don't know. I'd rather still use this interface than the original one in Oblivion. People weren't paying $60 for a minor gameplay rebalance. I wanted to check that out, but most people needed the graphical overhaul as their excuse to play this crusty old game in the modern day. I don't believe in the notion that game art ages, or that games become unplayable because of this aging. If a game had good art originally, it should be timeless. It might not look like what modern games coming out look like, but that's fine. Diving in, the one compliment I will give is that Unreal Engine 5 is really good at lighting. Literally every single scene that I've looked at, and I've been trying to visit as many iconic locations as possible, was aided by the lighting. This is a mix of two things. Bethesda's lighting utilization was really good for a game from 2006. Their engine didn't do lights in a particularly impressive way, but their level and world designers were still putting light sources in with real purpose. Scenes and important visuals are being highlighted with lighting. It's actually incredible how well the lighting works, considering we're talking about slapping a modern lighting system on a game from 20 years ago. Light sources have a mechanical implication. As such, having much clearer visuals for what is lit and what isn't not only helps the mechanics, but it just looks good. Every city looks better at night. Dungeons have clear visual contrast between light and dark areas. Light spells and torches serve actual functions. Oblivion gates were actually stunning how much lighting helped them. The entrance areas are immense light sources, and the lava and magical implements create glowing effects. Where Oblivion before was garish, with everything being concrete gray and red, now the area feels appropriately oppressive. Iliad Ruins were another favorite of mine. The weird organic looking textures have been replaced with a tile set that actually looks like it's carved out of stone, and the lighting helps the place feel like an area of magical significance. Light sources are dynamic. A dead guard dropping his torch will cast a shadow as his corpse lays on the ground. It's cool things like that should have been the standard in 2005, but hey, all we needed was 20 years and 125 gigabytes of spare space on an SSD for an engine that runs sub 30 FPS in the open world. Yeah, performance is a pretty big issue. Dungeons work great. I know some people raise an eyebrow at that, but I think a lot of people forget that this is ultimately a dungeon crawling game with a minority of focus on world exploration. World exploration is an issue, and it's the roughest part of the game, but thankfully the combat encounters are also really simple in the overworld. That said, I've got some gripes with the decisions made. Number 1, the fog. There's an ever-present fog that's being used to muddy the image in the distance so that the LODs don't look like absolute shit. But it also causes closer objects to look bad. Many have identified it as a piss filter, but it's not quite color grading, as it disappears during certain weather events and isn't as aggressive inside interiors. It's ruining the cities during daytime. If you want to check it out, use the command r.fog_0, and watch as every city becomes slightly less brown and a little crisper. It can't be understated. This effect is ruining the daytime visuals for every city in the game. Not that every city made it through the remaster blender. The rankings have changed. Old titans like Anvil are now losing out to underdogs like Breville because Anvil was turned into a soupy, desaturated mess. while Breville grew up into an actually visually interesting slum. However, my biome ranks have largely remained the same. Forests at the bottom because they got turned from generic into absolute UE5 slop. Blackwood, which got butchered, the Gold Coast, which has been desaturated, and then the mountains, which look pretty good. Unfortunately, the mountains are where the Aurora are. Yeah, they added the Skyrim Aurora to the Gerald Mountains. It's garish and ugly and unfortunately also visible from anywhere on the map. Then they also shoved in a really bright galaxy into the night sky. Bethesda has always been good at one thing, skyboxes. So it's visually jarring to play Oblivion with a nighttime skybox as ugly as the one this has. Shivering Isles was unique because it had a special skybox tied to being a realm of Oblivion, so you'd see various space features. Then they butchered that as well because it wouldn't be as impressive to double up on the space motifs on both areas. The moons also just look bad. The forests are also just impressively garbage. I mean, just irredeemable slop. 5 minutes in UE5 with store assets. I can commend that you can at least tell the distinct subbiomes of forests apart, but yeah, the secret is that the forests in Oblivion were actually never good. The people of Cyrodiil, they're alright. You have to bear in mind, I can play these games for an hour and stop seeing the faces as anything weird. That's just what people in this area look like due to some kind of historic mine that must have poisoned the water. I will say that the current models are better for 2025 than the Oblivion models were for 2006. The Beast Folk are pretty bad. Don't let Drownsing the Cum be an indicator of their general quality though. He's just a product of the character creation being fairly authentic to the original experience. There were some voice acting changes though. More voice actors have been added to expand the roster. They've kept some of the originals for certain races and then replaced that actor on the others that they had also covered. For example, they have the original Nord voice acting, but with the Skyrim voice actor taking over for the orc lines. This has caused a few travesties, like removing the iconic necrophilia line.
By the way, do you happen to know what the fine is here in Cyrodiil for necrophilia? Just asking. That's nothing compared to Morrowind. Thanks.
By the way, do you happen to know what the fine is here in Cyrodiil for necrophilia? Just asking. That's nothing compared to Morrowind, thanks.
I was dungeon crawling, so I didn't do enough quests to gauge if the new voice acting is bad or if it ruins the narratives. I can't imagine it ruins it any more than they already are. But the old voice acting wasn't particularly good anyways, so I doubt it's any worse than it was before. Most of the assets in the remaster are alright. A lot of people don't have a nostalgic connection to them and so identify them as soulless, for now, but they really are. There's not a strong central artistic vision tying these aesthetics together, so they all work when you compare them one to one, but in-game you can see a clash in art style. Whoever was making armor models was not talking to the people making the creature models. Everything feels like it was made in a vacuum, which is why the quality is so inconsistent. At best, they simply put more money and time into areas they identified as being important. In other cases, look at the Great Forest. I'm not an art guy, but some of these things stand out even to me as being bad. The big thing is, if I'm noticing the quality of assets, they're probably either standing out as good or bad. I think a good concluding point in the remaster would be back at the start with the main menu. Oblivion's main menu is simple but iconic. It fades into the Roman numerals for 4 before revealing it to be the central letters of the word Oblivion. We get a slow pan of the map in the background, emphasizing the big world of the game and the stylings you'd see of the user interface. Obviously, Oblivion's main theme playing helps a lot. Re-Oblivion opens with a black screen. A flaming letter O from the Daedric alphabet appears on screen, revealing within it the silhouette of a person of body type 2 wearing Imperial Legion armor, which is generally considered to be what the champion of Cyrodiil looks like. Obvious issue being, this makes it look like the cock is coming out of the Oblivion Gate to invade Cyrodiil, not that he's defending Cyrodiil from these Oblivion Gates. It's also just a PNG, animated a little bit to give the illusion of breath. Main menus matter, even if you only see them for a short time. Bethesda's always done decent with relatively simple menus, but this is just soulless and lazy, and conveys a lack of care about the visual imagery. In a remaster, where the goal is to update the visual imagery. As though they butchered Paradise. This is one of my favorite parts of the game. It's not just beautiful, and what Bethesda should have been leaning into with their fantasy games, but a great surprise hidden in the main quest. So it's paramount that it be one of the best looking areas in my eyes, because while the Deadlands are Oblivion, So is Paradise. Paradise allows the player to see Oblivion for more than just a hell allegory, which sets up the Shivering Isles quite nicely. So the Shivering Isles also being done poorly does not help, considering this is literally the best part of the game and best expansion Bethesda had ever made. And they charged an extra $10 for the DLC again, despite Shivering Isles coming with the Game of the Year edition for over 15 years. Surely charging extra would justify a smidge more effort be put into the DLC content, considering it is some of Oblivion's most iconic locations and questing. If Fallout 3 does get a remaster in this vein, it will be kind of bizarre, coming from someone who has played a lot more of Fallout 3 lately than the average person probably ever has. I find Oblivion much easier to enjoy by simply playing than Fallout 3, so a gameplay faithful remaster might be controversial. The lighting overhauls would be very likely to turn out amazing, but I can see massive optimization issues in some of the game's denser areas. I still stand by the notion that none of this should exist, but on the other hand, remember that Fallout 3 getting a remaster will mean we're going to get a ton of content of people fighting about it, so that will be fun. Welcome to the credits. Don't dip out just yet, this is more than a sales pitch. Moments like these are some of the few times I get to express myself after months of tortuous editing, and I do mean months. To a lot of people who saw the Morrowind video, I just appeared in their lives one day. While it might not seem unreasonable to assume the Oblivion video wasn't happening after only 3 months, it is unreasonable to the person who has to live this. Thank you if you started at the beginning and made it here. It means a lot to me that people do that. I have a hard time believing people sat through the entire Morrowind video in a single sitting doing nothing else but watching, but that idea only inspired me to do a better job with this one. Objectively, I think the standards have been raised for myself. I like to think that there is going to be a Skyrim video, but I don't know if that's going to happen until I start the project, and that can only happen after this video is published. Not an Elder Scrolls channel, should put that on a shirt at some point. I have other content, and if you like that content, then you should subscribe. I don't know how sustainable these really long videos are. Let's give out thanks. First to Bethesda for creating Oblivion, and for all the people who worked on this game I spent 12 hours mercilessly shredding apart. That's a joke, of course. Thanks go out to the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages for maintaining the superior wiki. It really helps when you are validating information 3 months after your playthrough. So does having a handy research team on the Discord server. These guys helped with some of the more annoying aspects of research, like when an archivist decides to just delete a bunch of old Xbox magazines. I also want to thank all the people who left comments on my previous videos and also participated in the live streams and the community. And, well, the broader Elder Scrolls community deserves thanks as well. This video was literally impossible without the foundation that these guys provide. Finally, I want to thank my incredibly patient patrons. I told them up front it was going to be a long project, but even then, I still feel they were very patient through this process. We're going on 9 months now, which was half the time of the Morrowind video. Anyone who donated since January of 2021 is currently scrolling by on the screen. I really do appreciate the people who, ending this is hard, because I'm on page 303, and doing this at the very end of the project. I'm the sort of person that when I have an emotional reaction, I usually just go Spartan. I guess if you haven't, you can go watch the Morrowind video now, or if I do end up making it and it's out by now, the Skyrim video. I guess I'll see you around.
All hail the champion of Cyrodiil.
Oh yeah, and one last thing. I know I said illegal wrong. That was intentional. Mispronunciations drive up engagement more efficiently than asking people to comment, like, or subscribe ever has. Okay, it's time to wake up. You've massively overslept.